Probably the biggest classroom management challenge in kindergarten is getting them to stop talking. The blurting, the interruptions, the constant calling out while you're trying to teach. And after a while, it starts to feel like you're spending your entire day saying, "Stop talking. I'll wait for you to be quiet. Raise your hand. Remember, level 0 voice," over and over again. And honestly, that's exhausting because when your class is constantly noisy, it becomes really difficult to teach, give directions, or even finish a sentence or thought without getting interrupted. So in today's episode, I want to chat about a simple classroom management tool that can help reduce calling out and teach your students what appropriate participation should actually look like in a real kindergarten classroom. It's called the Chatter Challenge. So let's dig in. Welcome to the Kindergarten Toolbox Podcast. I'm your host, Amy Murray, here to help you simplify kindergarten with tools and strategies that actually work with real live 5 and 6-year-olds. Let's dive into your shortcut to calmer days and more confident writers. Today's episode is all about how to get the classroom chatter to stop the constant calling out, and how to help kindergarten students participate in an appropriate way without feeling like you're nagging them all day long. I think a lot of classroom advice comes way too complicated, way too quickly. One of the biggest things for calling out I hear is blurt beads, which sounds great on the surface, but if you've got half a classroom calling out, are you going to be able to keep track of blurt beads for the whole class? And is that something that's actually manageable for you? Because here's the thing, simple systems build consistency, and consistency is what actually changes behavior over time. So you need a simple system, and a lot of advice I see out there is far from simple. But let's chat about how the Chatter Challenge works in a real kindergarten classroom. One thing I really think is important when it comes to calling out is remembering that kindergarten students often forget or don't truly know the appropriate way to participate in class. They're not sure what that looks like. And if you're like me, sometimes it was okay for the whole class to answer, and sometimes you preferred them to raise their hand. And the problem with that is when they're little, they really need to know what your expectations are so they can meet them. If sometimes it's okay for everybody to call out to answer and sometimes it's okay, or sometimes it's not okay and you need to raise your hand, that can quickly become confusing. So a lot of times we find ourselves saying things like stop blurting, stop interrupting, raise your hand. Or worse, when you just sit there and say, "I'll wait till you're quiet." I'm so guilty of that one. But sometimes our students need to actually be taught what those expectations look like step by step. And inside the Chatter Challenge, there's a visual anchor chart that walks students through exactly what to do when they have something to say in class. And the steps are super simple. First, you pause and listen. Is it a right time to raise my hand? Is it a right time to share this thought? That's the pause. Right? Then, if it is, you raise your hand. That's step 2. And step 3 is remembering to hold your thought inside your brain until you are called on. That is really tricky for our impulsive 5 and 6-year-olds. And then step 4 is share when you are called on. That, like I said, the hold your thought is the really important piece for kindergarten because a lot of them are so excited to share, they immediately blurt it out before they even realize that they're interrupting. And instead of correcting that behavior all day long, this gives them a visual routine that they can practice over and over again. And when they call out, you can just point to your steps and remind them. The visuals are huge in kindergarten classroom management. They are a must-have. If students don't understand the expectation, they can't meet it. And when they can see it, they can understand it. So once the expectation's been taught and practiced, then you can introduce the challenge piece of this. And this is where I think we start to overcomplicate classroom management a lot, like the blurt beads and things like that I talked about earlier. The behavior goal should stay really specific and really clear, not have perfect behavior all day long because no one does. Okay, that's too big and too vague. Make good choices is not a behavior goal. But instead, we're working on raising our hand instead of calling out. So raise the hand becomes the behavior goal. That's something manageable. That's concrete. That's something that we can actually practice and improve at. Then students can work towards earning pieces on a challenge board throughout the day. And inside the Chatter Challenge resource, there are 2 different challenge boards, so you can decide which one works better for you. There's one where you're a mountain climber and you're climbing up the mountain, so getting to the top of the mountain is the goal. And then there's a trophy board like our Build a Reward charts where you're building a trophy, so then building the trophy becomes the goal. And you can decide which works better for you. The little mountain climber is similar to our Build a Reward scenes, where you're just moving the mountain climber up. There is one board with 5 options and one board with 10 spaces, so you can decide which board works best for your classroom. But whichever board you choose, your students are earning pieces when they are displaying the behavior you want them to display. And if calling out is a major problem in your classroom, then maybe you're going to start to do it every time they remember to raise their hand. Okay. And it can be just one student. You can say, look, I really like how Joey raised his hand. I'm going to move our mountain climber for raising the hand. And then they should all quickly fall in line and follow and want to be like that so that they can be the reason that the mountain climber moves up the mountain. You can also, if it's not a pervasive problem like every single time, you can decide at the end of the class period. So like if you're sitting up front for a read aloud and you think that they did a good job with raising their hand, after the read aloud, you can say, hey, we did a great job raising our hand and not interrupting the story today. We're going to move our mountain climber, or we're going to earn a piece of the trophy. And so it's flexible. You can decide which way works better for your classroom. You get to decide when students earn pieces, how often you check in, and how long you want the challenge to last. If it's a big problem, you want this challenge to be short so that they can earn the prize and get rewarded quickly and help buy in. And then you can start the challenge over again. You can do it over and over again as long as they stay bought in. Maybe your class earns a piece after carpet time, after centers, after transitions, or just one check-in at the end of the day. You can really adjust it based on the needs of your students. And I think the flexibility matters because every kindergarten classroom is different. And one of the biggest objections I always hear when I'm talking about a whole class incentive like this is, what about the 1 or 2 kids who don't buy in? That is going to happen. And hopefully you have some individual supports for those students, which is a whole nother episode topic. But I do think that it's okay to reward a piece of the chart, even if the entire class isn't doing it. That's why picking individual students here and there is going to help you. Because if you say, oh, look, so-and-so and Susie were raising their hands, let's earn a piece of our chart because I noticed you were raising your hand. You don't have to have the whole class doing it at the same time in order to use the chart successfully to help kids to recenter and be like, oh yeah, my goal is to raise my hand. I should be working on that too. It really can be almost as powerful, sometimes more powerful, if you're just picking certain students instead of waiting for the entire class, because sometimes you'll be waiting for weeks until everybody decides to buy in. And something else I wanted to point out is the reward itself is not actually the magic part. I think sometimes we feel pressure to create this giant reward system and constantly buy prizes or treats and bribes. But honestly, what changes behavior most is the consistency, the clear expectations, repetition, that immediate feedback. I like how so-and-so is raising their hand, and students feeling successful. That's what starts building the momentum and creating the snowball effect that you need, especially when you're challenging a class like this. One mistake I see teachers make a lot is changing systems too quickly. They'll try something for a day or two and think, well, that didn't work. But kindergarten students need repetition, a lot of repetition, especially at the beginning of the year or anytime you're trying to reset expectations. Students need time to learn the routine, practice it, trust the consistency, and buy in. Then they can understand what success looks like. That's usually when teachers start to see the biggest changes. If your students have been extra chatty lately, this can be a really fun reset to try with your students. Setting up a chatter challenge where you're challenging them to work together toward a shared goal can completely shift the energy in your room. And because the challenge boards, the visuals, the behavior routines are already done for you, and the text is editable, so you can change it up to meet the needs of your specific class, it's something you can start pretty quickly without spending your whole weekend creating the materials. The Chatter Challenge resource is linked down in the show notes, so if you want to take a closer look and try it out with your class, I'd love to hear how it works for you. Let me know. And I know that so much of classroom management in kindergarten comes down to the same core ideas. You need clear expectations, visual supports, and simple routines so that you can be consistent and not constantly reinventing your systems every week. If behavior feels bigger than just talking or calling out right now, or your classroom feels a little more chaotic than that, this is the kind of practical classroom management support that we get deeper into inside the Kindergarten Behavior Blueprint course. I'll link it for you in the show notes. And as always, I hope this episode helped you feel a little more confident and a lot less overwhelmed heading into your day. Talk to you next week. Thanks for listening to the Kindergarten Toolbox. I'm Amy Murray, and I'm so glad you're here. Be sure to check the show notes for all the links and resources from today's episode. For even more tips, tools, and support, head to teachingexceptionalkinders.com or connect with me on Instagram at teachingexceptionalkinders. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow along and subscribe to the show and take a minute to leave a review. It helps other kindergarten teachers to find us too. Teaching kindergarten is tough, but you're not alone. Here's to calmer days and more confident writers. You've got this.